Welcome to True Talk on WMNF 88.5. On today's program, we're going to be speaking about the ongoing ethnic cleansing and genocide in Gaza. But we're also going to be talking about what's happening on college campuses, universities, the Trump administration's war on academia, specifically on universities, and how the universities are responding. Some are capitulating, like Columbia. Others are planning to fight back, like Harvard. And the president is increasing the hostilities against Harvard specifically. We'll also have with us a guest from the Doha Institute, Mohammed Al-Masri, who will be speaking about an op-ed that he's published recently. Then my co-host. This is True Talk on WMNF. We'll be right back.
كنا محلانا واليوم زماما وبكات الماما شو مات في الشمة شكون اللي بلانا فكرت أصحابي حبوا على خرابي عطيتهم مترابي فرشوش وكفرشنا زرابي عيب على روحي ما نعيبش على قرابي رقدت ونحلم وفكت نجري على سرابي وفي غيبوبة وينك يا صحوبة وطلعوا ذيوبة وناس خوانا بيوتنا مقلوبة وطلب بالتوبة وأيام محسوبة والوقت يخذنا.
Welcome back to True Talk on WMNF 88.5 with Ahmed and Samar. And a lot is happening. The Trump administration is continuing its war on college campuses and universities in the name of fighting anti-Semitism. How is that going to land? How is that shaping up? Harvard announcing this week that they're not going to agree to the demands of Trump. Or telling the task force that Trump had created, which I think we should look into who it exactly is on that task force a little more, and what they're demanding of things like they want to basically do oversight and receivership. They want to decide which topics are being taught, how they're being taught, and who's teaching it, and to evaluate basically what these private institutions. Harvard happens to actually be as old as the United States itself, and the Trump administration wants to control who's being taught there and what they're being taught and who's teaching it. They asked the IRS to consider revoking Harvard's nonprofit status for not capitulating. And then today, the Trump administration is saying that they may ban or deny students, international students, from going to Harvard, which generates a lot of revenue for Harvard, but also keeps international students out of the most prestigious university in the world. Samar, you've been my co-host. You've been a professor and you taught at universities, including here in Tampa at USF. What do you think this all means, especially the idea of not allowing international students to study at an American university?
Assalamu alaikum, Ahmed. I think this is almost like in my wildest dreams, if I thought, okay, what can go wrong with America? This was really on the bottom of my list because, I went to the American University in Cairo, and it wasn't perfect, but it was amazing. The freedom that you have as a student and the freedom that our professors had, and we had American professors and Egyptian and Palestinian and from all really countries from Africa. And you go in one class and you learn something, and you go to the other class and he's teaching you another version of, especially that I specialized in Middle East studies and political science. So when I came to America and did my master's, and then I became a teacher at USF, the amount of ideas that you can disagree with from your students, the challenges. It was just a way to grow your mind, to grow your brain, to grow your character, and for the White House to start and dictate to you what you can teach and what you cannot teach. I mean, it didn't happen in Egypt. With the American University in Cairo. It didn't happen with any American university in Lebanon or outside the U.S., because the U.S. has several universities all over the world. So to happen in America is really, really, really the breaking point. This is where people need to wake up. And it has nothing to do with Palestine or Gaza or anti-Semitism, because you have many actually Jewish Americans who are very pro-Israel have written, I think, to the New York Times saying the president is using the idea of anti-Semitism to have control over the minds in America, the young minds in America. Like, okay, they might be using and scapegoating anti-Semitism, but the larger picture is control. Authoritarian control. So I am really in shock, Ahmed.
Right. I mean, and
I don't know if people are paying attention to what is going on or not.
People, very few people are paying attention, but those that are alarmed, and many people are saying this is a blueprint or playbook of authoritarianism. This is what dictators do to take over a society, and but usually people thought that the United States civil society and civic institutions were stronger than just being able to be collapsed so quickly. And the danger in that is that the Trump administration, it wants to do this ideological shift of what is being taught on college campuses. When you want, and I think this was even mentioned on other shows like Democracy Now!, whether it's earlier today or in the past, that authoritarian regimes, they usually go after the press, free speech, academia and civil society, human rights organizations, immigration, and because if you deny people's right to dissent, then people don't hear other alternative views. They can't, and if you block the media, then people cannot see. Then the public doesn't know what the government is doing. They're not under scrutiny. And when you go after academia and universities, now you're actually influencing the minds of future generations. And what are they going to replace what is being taught at Harvard with? For the most part, as you know, I mean, when it comes to the issue of Israel and Palestine and the occupation, apartheid, many of these universities have already been very much leaning towards the Israeli side and support of it. There's been freedom of speech. People can criticize, but for the most part, a lot of these universities and their endowments, they invest, for example, in Israeli companies, and they happen to be more tilting on the pro-Israel side. They didn't need the Trump administration to do that. There's not systematic anti-Semitism at these universities. For the most part, if you're a Jewish kid and you have good grades, you're going to get into good universities. Nobody's denying. It's not like where you had to have affirmative action and black kids were being discriminated against, which now that has been removed. It hasn't been that type of situation for that type of anti-Semitism on college campuses. So for this administration to be so concerned and to use or misuse or to, the idea of fighting anti-Semitism to carry out this other agenda is really dangerous, because whatever they're proposing is not only to fight anti-Semitism, it's to actually block people's right to speech. But it goes even beyond that. They want to talk about gender issues. They want to talk about diversity and inclusion and other matters. They want to talk, against liberal ideas and teach more conservative and right-wing ideas on these college campuses, which they think are not popular. So I think we're going to talk more about that in a little bit, Samar, as far as what's happening on college campuses, and maybe if we even have time, we'll take some phone calls. But there was an article, an op-ed that caught both of our eyes in the Middle East Eye, which is a publication. The website is middleeasteye.net, and the title is "The Gaza Playbook: Israel's 5-Step Ethnic Cleansing Strategies," run by Mohammed al-Masri, who is a professor of media studies at the Doha Institute. And he's actually joining us now. Welcome to the program, Mohammed al-Masri.
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. And we read your article, your op-ed, which was actually published, was it yesterday? And what is this playbook? What are the 5 steps to ethnic cleansing strategy, and why are you convinced that Israel's carrying it out?
Well, first of all, I think it's been obvious from the start of the war that Israel is interested in depopulating the Gaza Strip. Just really quickly, before I get into the 5 steps, at the very start of the war, Israel was actually lobbying other countries in the region, and the United States was helping Israel lobby Jordan and Egypt, and also countries in the European Union to take Palestinians in. So there was an attempt very early on to basically expel the Palestinians, and I think that's why it's one of the reasons why Israel worked so hard to sort of make life completely uninhabitable. They wanted to render Gaza completely unlivable.
Right.
There's no other real rational explanation for destroying every single university, for instance, and all in the schools and the roads and the residential homes. I mean, it's as Donald Trump himself said, it's a demolition site. In any case. So I do think there are a number of other pieces of evidence that I could go through. And before I mention the 5 steps really quickly, I want to say that the conceptual backdrop for this article is the idea of Greater Israel. Greater Israel is basically a biblical interpretation of what the borders of the land of Israel are supposed to be or desired to be. And it's very mainstream within Israeli society and certainly within Zionist philosophy that all of the land is for them, is for the state of Israel, right? It's for the Jews, basically, right? At a minimum, there are different interpretations of the land, but at a minimum, that includes what is now the state of Israel, Israel proper, and also all of Gaza and all of the West Bank, including Jerusalem. That's the minimum. But
what's the maximum?
The maximum is actually a much sort of larger area from the Nile River to the Euphrates. So that includes large swaths of the Middle East, parts of Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Lebanon. So this is a very mainstream idea. It's sometimes portrayed in media as a far-right Israeli idea, this idea of Greater Israel, but that's nonsense, quite honestly. They did a poll recently, which I think is interesting. The Jewish People Policy Institute did a poll about 6 weeks ago. This is a few weeks after Donald Trump's ethnic cleansing proposal declaration, where he basically proposed expelling the Palestinians. And 85% of Israeli Jews agreed with the plan, liked Donald Trump's plan. So this is not some far-right, fantasy. This is a very mainstream thing. To be fair, there are some Israelis at least, who believe it's unrealistic. Not that it's undesirable as a goal, but that it's not realistic, at least in the short term. So Israel is working on implementing and enacting Greater Israel. They've been doing so for many, many years. It's one of the reasons why in the West Bank, they have been so aggressive with their settlement expansion program. Over the past 30 years, they've established more than 200 illegal settlements on Palestinian land. Israel now controls 60% approximately of of the West Bank. There are about 800,000 Israeli settlers all over the West Bank. And so that's because they believe that this land is for them, that it was promised by God to them.
I always find
So
it interesting that the people that started Israel, which were atheists, cultural Jews, not religious, claim that God, who they don't believe in, promised them that land, thousands of years ago. So that's the greater Israel.
Ilan
And often,
Pappé, the great Israeli historian Ilan Pappé, who's the author of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, he has a famous statement where he says, many Jews do not believe in God, but they believe he promised them Israel. So that kind of underscores your point.
right.
But so I just wanted to point that out, as that's kind of the conceptual basis. But now if you look at kind of the steps, I go through these 5 steps. I'll just mention them really quickly, and then if you have any questions about them. So the first step was muzzling the media. They took complete control over the media sphere and tried to limit critical coverage to the extent possible. They took very extreme measures, which I could speak to here if there's time. The second step was shrinking the population. This was basically a step of kind of eliminationism. Benjamin Netanyahu was talking about thinning out the population to a minimum, right? And so this is why they were, dropping bombs indiscriminately and basically trying to kill as many people as they could get away with. And then the third step, it was to destroy the healthcare system. Of course, an inevitable consequence of the indiscriminate bombing campaign was injuries. And so they actually wanted to create a kind of humanitarian crisis. This was written in an op-ed by Jarrah Island. He was calling for a humanitarian crisis and also epidemics of disease. So they destroyed the healthcare system and then worked to prevent any kind of medical aid from getting into the Gaza Strip, so that people injured in bombings would either suffer or die slow deaths, or both, right? And by the way, Giora Island is a top security mind in Israel. He's a former head of the National Security Agency, and he's been an advisor to the Defense Ministry since the start of the war. And he's the author of the famous General's Plan that was released toward the end of, I think it was September, October of 2024 rather. So that was the third step, destroying the healthcare system. And then the fourth step was rendering Gaza uninhabitable, which I mentioned a moment ago. So they wanted to basically make it such that even if the war were to end, there would be nothing left for Palestinians.
Right.
And then the fifth step was diplomatic legitimization. So this is where the Trump proposal, the so-called Trump proposal, comes in. In January, of course, Trump comes up with this wonderful idea. It's a humanitarian gesture. He wants to expel all of the Palestinians from Gaza. It's unlivable, it's uninhabitable, it's a wasteland, it's a demolition site. And so he wants to help the Palestinians by doing that. In fact, this was not the Trump proposal. This was the Israeli plan all along. But this is part of the diplomacy. They're trying to rebrand it as a Trump plan, as a way to kind of take pressure off of Israel. Right, and that's kind of what the United States has done historically. It takes pressure off of Israel, and they're doing that once again. So those are the 5 steps, and I mean, I unpack them in some detail in the article. It's a relatively long article. I think it's close to 2,000 words, but I would encourage folks to have a look at it.
Yeah, it's on Middle East Eye, middleeasteye.net if you want to read it. But before I turn it to Samar, it's just mind-blowing, and that what Israel is doing is so obvious over the past 17, 18 months now, or 16 months, with all this death and destruction, killing so many people, so many children, destroying the whole area. and then claiming to be self-defense. Where is the self? When does it's not self-defense to commit genocide and kill so many children? On a conservative, now it's like basically over 51,000. That's like conservative numbers. Some are saying it's up to 200,000 because of people that are buried under the rubble, and they're using starvation as we speak now. For a month, food has not gone in. People are starving. They're using starvation as a weapon, and the world is just continuing to, accept this idea that Israel is defending itself. Meanwhile, what you're saying is all of this is to mask the real agenda that they've been pursuing all along of Greater Israel, grabbing more land and dominating the region. Is it? I mean, do these international institutions mean nothing? The rule of law mean nothing when it comes to Israel?
Well, that's a big question, right? I mean, I think the United States and Israel have both been, working to kind of undermine the so-called rules-based order for many years. But I do think it's interesting that U.S. media don't publish very much on the kinds of things that I'm talking about, where you will find some information, and in some cases very damning information about Israel's agenda and their war policies is in Israeli media. So actually much of my research involves going to Israeli media. That's where I read, Giora Island. That's where I read, about the 100-to-1 ratio, which has been published on in Israeli media. That's where Israel gives itself the right to kill, quote, more than 100 civilians, end quote, in the process of trying to kill a single Hamas commander. And that 100-to-1 ratio is one reason why so many women and children have been killed in this war. The UN estimates that about 70% of the killed are women and children. This is based on a massive 6-month sample. And this doesn't include, people who are not women or children, but who are elderly, who are disabled. Overwhelmingly, Israel is killing non-combatants, and that is very much by design. But Israeli media publishes on this. The United States, I have not seen any reports in American media about the 100-to-1 ratio, for instance, nor have I seen anything in American media about the kill zone policies. Israel has kill zone policies where they basically arbitrarily demarcate certain areas as kill zones, and then anyone that moves in that kill zone is killed. So there was a recent quote making a video making the rounds on social media. I mean, this has been throughout the war, but if you want a kind of a visual and sound, evidence of this, there's an Israeli commander who was caught on video saying, and I'm quoting him now, "Everyone you encounter is an enemy. If you see a figure, open fire, neutralize the threat, and keep moving. Do not hesitate and do not second guess." And I actually double checked to make sure the translation is okay from Hebrew, because I don't know Hebrew, but this is an accurate translation. And this is Israeli policy. If you remember back, Ahmed and Samar, to December of 2023, Israel killed 3 of its own captives in Gaza. They were They were shirtless and wearing waving white flags. But Israel shot them because they had wandered into one of these kill zones that nobody knows about, other than the Israeli forces themselves. So, it's perplexing to me, to say the least, that we don't get much coverage of these kinds of things, nor of the starvation policy that you referenced, Ahmed, in American media.
But doctor, how long can this go on? Because the rest of the world is seeing it, not doing much. Maybe the UN, the European Union just made a statement a few days ago that what is going on is close to ethnic cleansing. However, isn't Israel jeopardizing what could happen in the Arab world? I mean, in Jordan, the street is boiling. In Egypt, I mean, without authoritarian systems in the Arab world, the Arab street would be marching towards Israel. How long? How long can they trigger these pressure points before there is a breakdown? If they lose Jordan, they will lose the longest border they have with an Arab country where people are really angry. I mean, our media is not showing it, Arab media are not showing it, but people who monitor social media, they know that the Arab streets are extremely angry. How long can they keep going and continuing this ethnic cleansing?
I don't have a good answer. I didn't, to be honest with you, I didn't expect that it would go on this long. I was asked this question. I can remember being asked in the fall of 2023 about the prospect of the war going throughout 2024, because at that time, Benjamin Netanyahu promised that it would. And I remember at that time saying that I thought that that was unlikely. So I was wrong. So I really have no idea how long this can go on. But I do know, as one analyst said, and I agree with him, there has never been a genocide, at least not in the modern era that I can recount, that has stopped because the genocidal actor decided to stop. It's always an external force that forces the genocidal actor to stop. And in this case, Israel is looking around, and there has been basically just inaction. I mean, in some cases, there's been outright support, like from the United States has been overwhelmingly supportive of Israel throughout the war, not just by providing the weapons, but also providing diplomatic cover at the United Nations. And circumventing U.S. law, right? Circumventing the Leahy Law and other U.S. laws that prohibit the U.S. government from doing exactly what it's doing right now. But if you look at the Arab world, and somebody, you mentioned the Arab world, I mean, yes, it's true that there's a ton of anger, but it's also true that Arab governments have done next to nothing. You don't have there's not some major uproar. Certainly there's no threat of military action. These countries have not even been willing to sever economic ties, right? To say nothing of doing something more dramatic, like, threatening an oil embargo or something like that. I mean, when Iran, which is not an Arab country, but when Iran did seek to, engage Israel militarily, Jordan, which you just referenced, Samar, actually was shooting down Iranian drones on behalf of Israel. So, the Arab governments are either in cahoots with the U.S. and Israel, or they are too scared to do anything, right? I mean, I don't think we.
That's exactly, yeah, I agree with you, but aren't they jeopardizing the fall and the collapse of any of these regimes?
Well, I think it's a huge risk, especially over the long term. I mean, these states are losing credibility, and it's a huge risk for Israel and the United States as well. I mean, Ilan Pappé, who I referenced a few minutes ago, the Israeli historian, he's been writing for the last 18 months about the collapse of Zionism, and he believes the collapse is coming. And if you look at the opinion polling data, Israel's numbers have plummeted over the past 18 months, and not just in the Arab and Muslim worlds or in the global South, but even in Western Europe, in Canada, in Australia, in the United States. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was a poll released by Gallup that showed that 59% of American Democrats support are likely to say that they are pro-Palestinian, compared with only 21% who are saying that they are pro-Israeli. So it's almost a complete reversal now of the historical trend. And American youth, that 18 to 30 demographic is overwhelmingly now pro-Palestinian and very critical of Israel. So, and I think Israel can see this. I think the American administration, both administrations, Biden and now Trump, see this, and that's one of the reasons they're reacting so desperately. Right? These are not moves of strength. These deportations, the censorship that we're seeing, right? The arrests. These are not moves of strength. These are moves of desperation because they know they're losing the public relations war. I might have time for one more quick.
Yeah, I know you have to go, but I know you have to go. But something happened a couple of days ago, Professor, where the suspect in the Josh Shapiro mansion arson fire actually, and I'm looking now at the New York Times. I just saw that a few days ago that the reason he gave the police is because of Shapiro's stand from the Palestinians. I don't see any discussion of that. The guy is not Muslim, not Arab, has nothing to do with the Arab world. He is very upset at what is happening with the Palestinians. And of course, the media had to say that he is disturbed, mentally disturbed. But isn't like you said, something that what is happening in Gaza is doing something also to Americans in America? Do you agree?
I do. I do. I think something is happening. I think it's sometimes difficult in the moment to see these shifts because they happen rather slowly. But I think that it's something to keep an eye on in the next, the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, I'm confident saying, based on the data that have come out lately, that the Democrats lost this last election, this presidential election, in large part because of Joe Biden's support and Kamala Harris's support for the genocide. There were 14 million people who stayed home. That obviously would have been more than enough to tilt the balance in Biden's favor. So, I think we have to keep a close eye on American policy in the coming months and years, for sure.
That was Mohammed al-Masri joining us live from Doha, Qatar, and speaking about his op-ed that was in the Middle East Eye about the steps for ethnic cleansing, the blueprint for it. You can find his article, Middle East Eye. Thank you for joining us. We'll be right back, Samar and I, and we'll be discussing Trump's war against universities. To change them forever in his favor with the excuse of anti-Semitism. Maybe if we have time, we'll take your phone calls. Our phone number is 813-239-9663. We'll be right back.
حزينة وكل وينة نلقى ودوانا فكرت أيامي وقلت يا حسرة مخيب هالدنيا ومحلاها الدنيا بلا غسرة.
We're back at WMNF. This is True Talk with Samar and Ahmed. I am Ahmed Bedier, and that's my co-host Samar Jarrah. Samar. The war on college universities is increasing by this administration. We've never seen this before, that the administration, like federal government, is so vested into changing what's happening in college universities, and starting with the most, biggest and most famous universities, schools like Columbia, Harvard, Cornell, and others. And I wanted to play something for you by a professor of law at Columbia, and basically saying that this is the death of Columbia as we know it.
I think she's retired, Ahmed, just retired.
Okay, she's just retired, but she's a former professor of law at Columbia University. Her name is Catherine Frank. Here she is.
Hi, this is Catherine Franke, a retired member of the Columbia Law faculty. You know, Columbia University was founded 271 years ago as King's College. It later reincorporated itself as Columbia University in the city of New York. What I am hearing is that tomorrow we will learn that the university has agreed to a form of formal oversight and governance by the Trump administration, thus rendering Columbia University a subsidiary of the federal government of the Trump administration. The Columbia University that we all know, that I loved, will die tomorrow. In bits and pieces, sometimes big bits, sometimes small bits. Over the last 2 years, Columbia has little by little given up any kind of meaningful commitment to its faculty, to its students, and to its incredible history as one of the most premier research and teaching institutions in the world. And that institution dies tomorrow. I'm just heartbroken. I'm really just heartbroken. You will be told that the university had no choice but to do this to get our $400 million back. We'll see if we get it back for how long. And it had to do so because we had a problem of rampant anti-Semitism on our campus. Let me say clearly, we do not have a problem of rampant anti-Semitism on our campus. We have not failed to address the issues of safety of our students. Quite the contrary. The university has put its faculty and its students at risk through its own actions across the entire constituency of the university and allowed itself to be held hostage to a political agenda that will now be concretized in a new way in this agreement that we'll hear about tomorrow. I'm just brokenhearted. And if you care about Columbia and are part of that university or the idea of a university in a free society and a democracy, you should be too.
So that's Catherine Franke, former professor of law at Columbia University, saying this is the death of Columbia as we know it. Columbia capitulated and agreed to the demands of the Anti-Semitism Task Force, which is made up of a bunch of people from the Trump administration. Most of them are really not that well known, but they're very ideological and making all types of demands of these universities and threatening to cut off funding. I didn't realize how much money these elite universities are getting from the federal government. Columbia getting $400 million, and Harvard, some are saying it's $4 billion up to $9 billion.
I'll explain something very important, Ahmed, because my cousin is a scientist, a very well-known, renowned scientist, and he just moved moved to Colombia. He has a lab, Ahmed, and they do DNA, like extremely specific DNA testing and DNA exploration.
Research.
Just to look for one tiny speck of gene that has to do with some kind of cancer. This kind of research, okay, you can get grants from companies and all that, but the U.S. has an edge on science globally because of its support of labs across American universities. So the U.S. has a vested interest in giving this money because the U.S. cannot have a lab for this particular cancer and a lab for this particular climate development. So it's a policy to give America an edge as a superpower, and part of its soft power is to encourage these scientists from all over the world. And by the way, my cousin is not Palestinian. I'm not going to say more. But bring all these brilliant minds, Ahmed, and he came from England, to America to be part of this scientific, geographic revolution and give America an edge. Right. So it's not a charity. No, there is a reciprocal relationship between the U.S. government and these institutions.
Yeah, they basically give grants, outsource this research to the best universities And it's mostly science-based. This is not political research. This is not handouts for their diversity or for scholarships. This is for research that the United States government and corporations benefit from, and society as a whole. And as you said, especially a lot of it is medicine related, and some are technology. But the Trump administration is looking and finding ways. Things that are in the past have been off limits, are not politicized to twist people's arm. But now they're using it and misusing it to try to get what they want under this claim, which we've been hearing since October 7th, that somehow all these universities on college campuses are just infested with anti-Semitism and hatred of Jews. And that's not the reality. When you talk to people on the ground, you talk to the professors, when you talk to the students, it's just not happening. It is not there. What is happening since October 7th are students who have seen images of so many massacred children and destroyed families and genocide that's happening in Gaza. And they've been speaking out against it and demanding that their universities, most of whom or many of whom are actually investing in Israel. This is like to show you that the universities themselves are pro-Israel. They're investing in Israeli companies using their funds, and they're calling on them to boycott and divest. And that is what they're describing, and to stop and against a genocide. And that is what their definition is of anti-Semitism. And another part of that is that because of their presence and because they're demonstrating against the actions of Israel, that is making some Jewish students on campus, feeling unsafe. Not because they were physically attacked, not because they were picked up by the government, not because they were, detained. No, because the words of these other protesters, many of whom are actually Jewish students themselves that are protesting the genocide, those words are hurting their feelings and making them feel unsafe. And in some areas where the encampments were on campus, in the small areas that they're in, those students could not necessarily walk through. Even though, Samar, you and I have seen so many social media posts of Zionist students that would actually go in with the Israeli flag and stand in the middle of the encampment, trying to provoke people to do something to them, and they are mostly just ignored. And this is what's been playing out. And if there has been violence on campus, it's been because of the police and because of actually pro-Israel protesters or counter-protesters, as we've seen in UCLA in California, where the encampment there were literally attacked and beaten by pro-Israel hooligans, other students, and some of them off campus that were attacking them, and the police just stood by and did not protect the students that are peacefully protesting. And that's where the violence is. Now, to summarize all that, they're saying all of that and that chaos is because all these people hate Jews and they're anti-Semitic, which is basically not true. Right?
Not only that, there are saboteurs, what they call them, saboteurs.
Yeah, they go into, they're either provocateurs or people who do sabotage. Yeah.
So, and it's so
much evidence of it.
Yeah, because like you would wear a hijab and then and say the nastiest things about Jews, and we don't do that.
Give us an example. There's one famous one. There's one woman that was saying that was doing something. And it turned out she's Israeli American Israeli, like pro-Zionist herself, and was saying that.
Yeah. But you know what, Ahmed? There is a larger picture, and the larger picture is trying to have one trend of thought in America. Now they are saying it's anti-Semitism and targeting American Muslims or people traveling. And you'd think they're all Muslim, but for instance, 2 days ago, an American Christian who voted for Trump, Atallah, was interrogated by the authorities when he was coming back from Canada, and he says, "I'm very afraid. I don't want to go to Lebanon for Easter and stuff like that." But now, a few days ago, it was a pure American, okay? No relationship whatsoever to the Arab world.
What is a pure American, by the way?
Meaning not half Palestinian, how your father can be American and your mom can be Palestinian, or vice versa.
Right.
I mean, nothing has nothing to do with activism, but maybe there are names that are being volunteered. That's what we don't know, to ICE or to what's the name of the AFT?
ATF.
Oh God.
Is it alcohol, tobacco, and firearm? And the reason you mentioned that is because they arrested somebody when they showed up to a court hearing somewhere, for a traffic citation.
Yeah. So now, okay. So is it like, because I am, and like a French scientist coming to America, why on earth would you stop him from coming in? Oh, they found that he has negative emojis of Trump. I mean, this is
on his phone.
Out of hand. On his phone. So that's why maybe we need to do a whole show, Ahmed, telling people what are the rights. Like, okay, let's say I'm traveling in a couple of weeks outside the US.
Be careful.
So, I mean, you go to my feed.
Maybe we should just do it on Zoom. Maybe you should just travel via Zoom and not actually physically.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So let's say the guy says, "Give me your phone." What if I don't?
He might tackle you.
What can I do?
Well, here's what I've heard people say. That when you're traveling back from overseas, somehow your rights at the border are somehow suspended as far as search and seizure. Normally, if you're walking down the street and a police officer stops you and says, "Give me your phone," you don't have to give it to him unless he has a warrant from a judge that says they can take your phone, or they can search your phone, or they can search the contents of your car or your house. However, at the border, they can search your luggage, they can search and look for things, and apparently they can also take your phone. Now, they ask people to unlock their phone for them so they can search it. And there are some articles out there. They have some devices and software that they can plug your phone in and scan it quickly, or download the contents of it, including your photos. Or that's more of a deep search. But others, they can just simply scan. There's two types of scans, and they look through your pictures or your WhatsApp or your messages. And what are they looking for exactly? It's not clear. But a lot of people have reported that, things that are critical of Trump, things are critical of Israel, things, of that nature, and that could hold you up. Now, if you refuse to hand over your phone or refuse to give them your password, then they can actually confiscate your phone from you and keep it for, some time. I don't know if it's a week, 2 weeks, and eventually I guess they do have the software to break in and download the content. So what some lawyers are suggesting is, when you travel, don't travel with your phone, or use a temporary phone just for your travel. And, don't include so many pictures on it, because there's also the issue of privacy. Maybe you don't want the government to have your photos. Maybe you don't want them to see what you have in your bank account. There's privacy matters here, and the Constitution should protect you against that. And it happened. I'm sure you heard the story about this one lawyer who was coming back from Mexico. He happens to be an Arab American, but he's a lawyer in Michigan. And he hasn't been protesting and he hasn't been speaking out, but he represented a woman. Her name is Samantha. She's not Arab. That was a protester. And because of that, they wanted to, on the way back, they asked him to unlock his phone. And he says, "Well, I'm a lawyer. There's client, lawyer privilege information on there. I can't just share it with you." Then they said, "Well, here's a notepad. Write down all the things you don't want us to look at." He said, that's impossible. I have 10 years worth of work on here. So they kept going back and forth and kept detaining him. And the issue is, when you're at the border there and they're holding you and detaining you for a few hours, you start just getting frustrated. You just want to leave. And they that's how they kind of twist your arm, because, especially if you have a connecting flight, you'll miss the flight, and then what's going to happen? So it's a really inconvenient. Some people just give up their rights. Say, well, I don't have anything to hide. And they may...
But Ahmed, I am worried about entrapment. What if they want me to spy on my mosque and I refuse that, and then they see that on my phone I do have a relationship with a guy other than my husband, or I'm cheating on him?
Well, I don't know. Maybe that could be.
So,
you're just saying hypothetical, of course, meaning like they may find things in there where you're vulnerable.
Exactly.
Or they maybe, you did something and then they hang it over your head. And because this is why the government doesn't have, they have to have probable cause. They have to have a search warrant. They can't just go in and target people and look for problems so they can, use it against them as leverage. That's not how things are done. That's not America. And that's what they do in other countries, authoritarian countries. I mean, there are many authoritarian countries that you travel to now. They don't check your phone like that when you go to the border, They don't ask you for it.
Because they know how tough it is to get into Apple phone in particular. I mean, before Ahmed used to be like they would use terrorism to scare people off and to take our rights. Now it's anti-Semitism. But really, the whole idea is control. Government.
Yeah, but now it's even getting more. It's anti-Trumpism. I mean, what is this? If you have something critical of the president, I mean, it's a bedrock of America. Like, all the talk shows make fun of the president, and this is just historical. The comedians and other things. That's part of what being an American is. Who's not going to say something critical of Trump or, of his administration? But now you have to be careful. Now, of course, this is what we're talking about is just for U.S. citizens. If you're on a visa and you're coming here and you refuse to unlock your phone, you're going to be turned away. Okay, so green card holder, your green card may be revoked. So it's a very gray area. And on top of that, the most dangerous part now is the lack of due process. Okay. In this country, one of the attractive things about our Constitution, our form of democracy, is you're innocent until proven guilty. The government has to prove their case in a court of law, and you're judged by your peers, and we have this whole judicial system. If the government accuses, they can't just come and say you're a terrorist and then just pick you up and not show any evidence and not have a due process, not have a court. But literally, that's what they're doing now. Starting with visa holders and green card holders, and they're picking them up like Mahmoud Khalil that was in Colombia and overnight taking them to Louisiana. And they're just saying, take our word for it, the guy's a terrorist. And they did this to this, supposed guy from, they did it for this Turkish woman as well. And she's still being held up. And they don't want to do due process. They want to just say, take our word for it. And that's what they did with this guy, that this American or a person that's here legally, that they shipped off to El Salvador. And the judge is told the administration that they have to bring him back. And the administration recognizes, the Trump administration recognizes they sent that young man to El Salvador by mistake. And they acknowledge that. And the judge said, you need to bring him back. They're saying to the judge, well, we can't. He's now in El Salvador. They're a sovereign country. We can't force him to do it, even though it's not really true. And the judge says, and then it went up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, you have to try. 9-0, they voted and said that the Trump administration, I forgot the exact language, and that's where the misinterpretation is, that they have to do whatever effort they need to bring him back to the United States. However, the Trump administration is saying, no, that's actually 9-0 in our favor, saying that we don't have to bring him back. So they're in defiance of the courts now. They're not listening. But the whole issue about that specific case is there was never any trial for this person. He's never had a criminal record. He's never been on trial for anything. The government didn't prove that he's part of MS-13 and somehow a terrorist and a threat to the country. They just picked him up and sent him to El Salvador. And now he's in this crazy prison with all these gangsters. And that could even happen to an American. Because if they just take you and then they just send you off and then you never even get a chance to say, hey, wait a minute, you got the wrong guy, then it's over.
Didn't he say in the White House with the president of Salvador, you need to probably build 4 more prisons because we will send Americans
Yeah.
to these.
And he says, well, we don't know the legality, but okay, what if he does it and then, and then you can't bring them back? This is really dangerous, and it's a threat to all of us. That's why we shouldn't stay quiet just when it's green card holders, just when it's people that are minorities, Hispanics, Arabs, others. We need to speak out against any type of violation of the Constitution or against due process. Samar, we're out of time. We're going to play the scoop next. This is WMNF Tampa. Have a great weekend, everyone, and stay safe and remain vigilant. And remember, being an American means you uphold the Constitution and defend the Constitution, not capitulate and turn this over into some sort of dictatorship. Have a great weekend. Take care. The scoop is now.